Thank you all for coming. I think you will not be disappointed with the program we have for you today. The caucus process. John Putnam, a true patriot from Dublin, Missouri, is going to explain this process to you. By the way, on the back tables we have handouts, and where additional caucus training is available. And we have handbooks about the caucus process, and we ask for $3 because it's expensive to print, and we're running out of money. Myself and Linda Boyd-Shell will talk about poll workers and how to prevent fraud. And to start our event, John, would you please lead us in a short prayer?
Can't do anything about it.
Thank you. Welcome here, and let's bow together in prayer. Okay, I think can everybody hear all right?
Yes.
All right, let's pray together. Father, it's such an awesome responsibility. It's such a privilege to have been charged with ruling ourselves. I pray that you would make us more accountable to you, to be people who govern themselves, so that so many officials and public elected officials would not feel like they have to govern us. We want to open our hearts to you to receive your direction. We want to be sensitive to what you want for our country, and we want to reflect your will as we deliberate in this very important election year. Help us to pick the leaders that you want for us. Bless our time together. Help us to make good contacts and to be more effective and efficient at representing your will. We pray in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Bob, can you lead us in the pledge?
Stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
By the way, if you do not know what township you live in, we have computers in the back and they can look it up for you. Before I get started with our program, I would like to make a few announcements. I'm sure you all know that one of our partners in the MOPP precinct project is Anita Felch. Anita had a tragedy in her life a couple of weeks ago, so she can't be with us, but she is in our prayers, and if you all keep her there. Since this is a strictly volunteer effort, we have a cake raffle going on in the back. Buy some goodies. We have some ladies in the back that can assist you with the raffle and all the handouts we have. Please recognize our chief organizer, Judy Safka. Judy, raise your hand. Mary Siren, Carol Downen, and Louise Bloom. We couldn't do it without them. We are partnering with Champion the Vote. They will work with us to get people to the caucuses and to get people registered. There's a sign-up sheet in the back where you can sign up to become a Champion the Vote champion and make phone calls, something we all love to do. I would like to issue a call to action and ask our MOPP volunteers, and I think we have quite a few of them here today, as well as some county coordinators, to start thinking about walking their precincts and neighborhoods. It should get warmer soon. And I challenge everyone to register at least 2 new conservative voters. There is voter registration cards in the back as well. Also, we have handouts. I would want you to pick up a flyer for Alliance for Truth. We must defeat the ballot initiative, Your Vote Counts. It's critical. We have a flyer from the St. Louis Tea Party about their event on Friday, Saturday, February 24 and 25. They also will talk about the caucus process. They have some excellent speakers, and look at the flyer and go there. And I'm really proud to be able to do this for Elise Koskiel. Koskiel is a high school student, and she is sponsoring a scholarship essay contest to encourage conservatism among young women. Please pick up the material and try to encourage some young ladies to participate. The deadline is May 1, and the price is, you get a prize of $500 to apply towards tuition and books. And one more thing, at the end of the session, I'd appreciate it if you could fill out a short survey so we know how we're doing. And Judy is standing in the back with more straw poll papers. If you need one, raise your hand and she'll give it to you. And then you can turn them in whenever you feel like it. So now let's listen to what John has to say.
Thank you, Frida. Can I use that corner right there? Good afternoon. My name is John Putnam. Hello. I see some faces that I know. Just by way of background, I have been involved in county party politics since 1984 in Jasper County. Some of you didn't know where that was, but if I say Joplin, most of you do know now. We have had quite a year in Joplin. A number of you have come to help, and we appreciate that so much. We've made tremendous progress. I think 50% of 8,000 structures have had building permits to replace them that were destroyed. And we're doing very well. We don't want you to be complacent because we will need help probably for about 5 years. A lot of college students are coming this spring over spring break. If you have a youth group or a college student that would like to participate in a mission project like that, we have churches all over the area that will facilitate that. I don't want to be a name dropper today, but I always have to tell you that my name is Putnam. I have the high privilege of being from a long, respected historical family in the United States of America. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Major General Israel Putnam, but he was the battle commander at Bunker Hill who said, "Don't shoot till you see the whites of their eyes." And I've kind of lived in his shadow as a kid growing up because he, like George Washington, was recklessly courageous and a real stickler for honesty. In fact, I can remember the night my father broke me of telling lies. And so it's a heritage worth living up to. And the first John Putnam came to Salem, Massachusetts in 1634. And so I'm about a 10th generation American. And when I got married and did some things in ministry for 10 or 11 years, came back to Missouri in 1980 or so, got involved at the precinct level as a committee man in 1984, and hung around trying to be helpful. And a few years ago they said, "Well, you're always here, will you be county chairman?" I didn't ask to do it, they just asked me, and I think that's the best way to get promoted, is to find is people who say, "You've done well so far, let's give you a little more responsibility." It works much better than walking in and telling somebody you're here to take over. So I have been county chairman for a number of years in Jasper County, and I've conducted 3 caucuses in the past during election years. I was a delegate in 1996 to San Diego for Alan Keyes, and then my wife was a delegate for George Bush in 2000. So we've been kind of through the whole process up and down the ladder. And it's a real privilege to come and talk to you for a few minutes about what my somewhat longer perspective brings to the table. How many of you are recently engaged in the political process who thought things are getting kind of out of control? Well, that's wonderful. The first caucus I can remember going to was 1984. It's a fairly straightforward thing, but I do remember wanting to put something on the platform. And I walked into the caucus as a newbie on the committee. In those days, we couldn't get enough delegates to go to the convention at a meeting. I think this year that's not going to be a problem. But we were still looking for people after the meeting was over to go to the state convention, as long as I can remember. And yet, I walked in and the process began and was over before I really had any idea what had happened. There's an expression we use in Southwest Missouri. He looked at me like a calf at a new gate. And that's sort of the way I remember the first caucus I ever went to. And my wife is secretary of our county caucus and a state committee woman now, and we have felt like it's very important to let the people know how these things work, for everybody to have an open, transparent, involved session. Too often, somebody comes in and moves that something happens, and somebody else stands up and says, "I move nomination cease," and there's a second and a declaration that that's happened before you ever realized when it was your turn to offer a nomination that might have been different than the one that was being offered. And when people leave that kind of a meeting, do you think it's very likely that we will have them working with us when the general election rolls around? No. When people feel like they've been shut out and their input hasn't been welcome, then it's very hard to achieve unity at the end. And believe me, I think that a united effort, not fractured by a third-party movement or a divided Republican Party, is what is going to be necessary to take back our country. I don't think we'll take it all the way back this year, but I'm hopeful that we can slow the train down immensely, or at least put the right kind of people in charge so that when we hit the wall financially, which we will do if they don't stop spending all this money, that we will have people who will work on behalf of the grassroots common American citizen rather than some powerful political interest or thug political machine. So let's see.
John, I don't mean to interrupt. Can we turn the volume up a little bit?
Does it need to be
Yes.
closer or louder?
Louder.
It's up as loud as it'll go, right?
It's just top, it's.
Okay. I'll try to speak a little.
Or put the mic a little closer.
Stay a little
No,
closer.
close, it's gonna be pop, it's.
Okay. Well, we're
Just
trying to
be louder.
record too, so
Oh,
we're
okay.
trying to maximize two things at once here.
Point of order,
Yes, sir.
can we raise the speaker up the table?
That might help.
Yeah.
We set that up on the table.
Yep, just.
Go right ahead. With my somewhat longer term perspective, I would like to say that our focus has been wrong. I think you probably realize that this year, which is really a repeat of almost every election I can remember since, now we need to move this back. I don't want to be careful, everybody. In other words, we have hoped that by electing the right person at the top of the ticket, maybe we could restore the country. Typically, conservatives, and I consider the word conservative is way overused now. I grew up as a Boy Scout working on merit badges and learning that the Constitution is like the box top on the board games I grew up playing with my grandmother. And there were 4 boys in my family, 3.5 years apart. And my brother, believe me, my oldest brother, I was the youngest, he was a tyrant. and he would suggest that the rules were a little different, and we were constantly consulting the box top to find out what the rules really said. And if you weren't careful, we did change the rules occasionally. We amended the rules by House convention. Okay, there was a process for doing that. But our country reflects an older brother who is trying to take advantage of his younger siblings because he's, thinks he's a little wiser or whatever. And they're trying to change the rules arbitrarily. There's certainly a way to do that, but we have to agree if we're going to have any kind of unified approach, we've got to be fair and open and follow the process that is outlined for us in the Constitution. Then we can all get behind the rules changes if they are in fact to be changed. So absent that, we eventually arrive at the point where we feel like we have to get more extreme. But fortunately, we've been given a country that we can have a revolution by ballots rather than bullets. And every 4 years we come up to this thing, and traditionally conservatives, there are a number of conservatives that all want to have a shot at it, and they divide the vote, and we end up with the most liberal or moderate in the Republican Party person receiving the nomination. And sometimes the way that process works out, it's not very easy to get people back together again. We did it on on Reagan's second election. He won the first one a lot closer, and we squeaked by on Bush's second election pretty well. But then we found out that he wasn't really as conservative as he had told us he was. So I want to ask you to change your focus from the people that you normally elect, especially at the top of the ticket, and having an expectation that they will make things that different. Let's see, will this come up easy? What do I need to do to make this come up? Is it going to sleep on us?
No, it's doing itself.
Will it come up by itself?
Push past it.
Can you do that? Bring that, I have a website, there's a page in your handouts called putnamspatriots.com, and well, I'll refer to your handout initially. Rather than, as I was saying, rather than electing someone, every one of which that I've worked for, and I've worked for a lot of people hard, they've all disappointed me to some degree or another. And I began to cast around for, there are so many issues today. You've got immigration, you've got Agenda 21, you've got cap and trade, and the liberal left keeps us divided because we're all passionate about one of these individual issues, and we don't really get, yes, we've stopped some of these, and we need to continue to do that, but there is a window of time every 2 years to some degree, and especially every 4 years when the election process starts, that we need to be very focused on a bigger picture than just the November election. Well, what do I mean by that? How many of you have gone to the ballot in November and thought, how did we end up with these candidates? Okay. Well, some might have said what we need to do is have better candidates in the primary, and we're making progress that way. But if your focus is on the primary in August in Missouri, you're still too late, because the filing period for those races is in March, for mostly the month of March in Missouri. So engaged conservatives that want to really make a difference need to be attentive from February 27th or 8th, I think it is, to March during the filing period, and then The process sort of works itself out after that. And of course, additional to that, this year we have the caucuses that choose the people who will go to select the president. But if you would consider this, there'll probably be something tomorrow that will alienate a new group, but I mean, how could anybody alienate 70 million people in 1 week? I just don't. But listen, with a divided legislature and gridlock, none of these big issues are probably going to pass. We can kind of let our guard down for a little bit about something getting passed with the situation we've got right now. We can change our focus for 8-9 months onto the election process. And as you think about that, at the top of my handout are the 7 things that I think are most important during this process. And I'll give you this little bit of a bigger picture before we talk about caucuses specifically. The first thing that we have to be doing all the time is to be conversant about constitutional principles. And I'll give you one example. There are constitutional principles behind good legislation. Thomas Jefferson called them the laws of nature and nature's God. George Washington said the propitious smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right which heaven itself has ordained. Most people in America are not even conversant with what the laws of nature and nature's God are anymore. If someone asked you, well, what is one? You'd be the calf at the gate, maybe. But when legislators cooperate with these principles, we have good laws, and when they try to work around them, we have a bad experience. Just as there is a law of nature that if you walk off the top of the Empire State Building, you will promptly find yourself on the sidewalk, there are natural laws that relate to our social relationships, that certain things will happen when you do certain things. They don't resolve quite as fast as the law of gravity does, maybe. But there is a law, some of you have heard of, called the law of sowing and reaping. If you plant an apple tree, I promise you, you're not going to get a peach tree. For those that say there are no absolutes anymore, help me out here. There are some things that happen. Well, if you, through all well-intentioned purposes, decide in the name of social justice and your view of what's fair, decide to take some people's private property and transfer it to another member of society, people will put up with that to a small degree. When it begins to be excessive, you find out that there was that fairness and social justice were not exactly what was planted in that tree. What was planted was envy on the part of one party who wants more, and resentment on the part of the other party. And these two character traits are natural responses when you have your stuff taken, and that will grow up into a tree that has in the past and will again, if allowed to flourish, end up in civil war between parties. That is the nature of the redistribution tree that they try to plant every so often. Being able to articulate principles like that and explain why all charity needs to be local and voluntary, more efficient and actually can work if it is, will equip us all to be better advocates for the issues that we care about. So I have passed out a little brochure called The Founder's Formula for a Successful America. I picked 12 of those principles and then referred you to a book called The 5,000-Year Leap to get you grounded in those principles, to make all of us better at arguing for those principles. That's the first thing we need to do. The second thing is that we need to recenter from the bottom up the political parties on constitutional principles. And that happens through the precinct or ward system. You all use wards over here in this part of the state more than I, so if I say precincts or wards, we're talking about the same thing. Oh, I'm sorry, townships. But Thomas Jefferson said, "The article nearest my heart is the division of counties into wards, now often called precincts, townships, or parishes. Should America's leaders become corrupt and perverted, the division into wards constituting the people enables them by that organization to crush regularly and peaceably the usurpations of their unfaithful agents and rescue them from the dreadful necessity of doing it insurrectionally." That's the whole point. If we do it at that level, we don't have to get the guns out. "In this way," he said, "we shall secure the continuance of purity in our government by salutary, peaceable, and regular control of the people." That theme is the whole reason Missouri Precinct Project started, was to encourage people to get involved at the precinct level. And that's an ongoing challenge, again, with a short window of making a difference. Every 2 years, at the primary, again, in Missouri, you file during the filing window in March, and then you're elected to a precinct position in August in the primary. But the next 3 weeks, the party reorganizes, whichever party you choose to be affiliated with, and they elect chairman and vice chairman of legislative districts and the counties. Those officers become what's called in Missouri the state committee, the senatorial district committee, and those people, in my case, there's 18 of us in my senatorial district, 32, that elect the state committee. If all of those people up through the chain are constitutional conservatives, we can restore constitutional principles in this country much faster than we ever will by trying to elect a president who will make all of this stuff happen the way we think it should. So I want to, half the precinct seats in Missouri are vacant. And I want to encourage you to look at your voter ID card, find out what your precinct is, find out who your precinct committee man or committee woman is, if you have one, or your township committee man or committee woman. If you don't have one, go fight for your country. File. It really doesn't take a lot of time. It's a little intense there during the reorganization process, but then it's pretty well set in motion for the next 2-year period. So we have this window in August when all of that happens. And this organization that's sponsoring the caucus meeting can help you know when that comes around and how to participate in that. Many other people are in those seats and have been for years because somebody asked them to be, and no one has ever contested whether they should be or not. And some of them do it strictly because it gives them a little bit of prestige when they play bridge with their friends or whatever. And they're really not interested in anything other than just doing whatever the county chairman tells them to do when it's time to grease somebody's palm or whatever happens in crony politics. And so by being aware of that organizational process and being participants in it, Thomas Jefferson says we can cleanse corruption in government. That's the second thing we need to do. The third thing we need to do is gear up for these caucuses and the other election. We're going to spend most of our time on that. And then we need to register voters. The Champion the Vote project will help you do that. I'm very excited about this technology, although it's not fully functional yet. What they will be able to do if you sign up with them is mark your house with Google Earth on a computer where your address is and a red dot, and show you all of the people who are likely constitutional, maybe Christian conservatives on the basis of their subscriptions or their purchases from Amazon.com, who are likely conservatives, Christian people that would vote like you would but are not registered to vote in your neighborhood. And make it very easy for you to go talk to a few neighbors. Now, I'm not entirely excited about the invasion of privacy, but that technology is there and it's existing, and we need to use it, especially in this election. 30 million unregistered Christian conservative people didn't vote in the last election. If we had 5 million of them registered, the outcome would be totally different. So that's a very efficient way that you'll be hearing more about as we go forward. And then we need to prevent voter fraud, which at the elections more and more, and Frida will be talking about that in a few minutes. And then we need to work for constitutional conservative candidates in the election campaigns, try to make sure they get elected and then get out to vote. There are efficient ways to do that. One of the things that I can just mention to you, if you do have somebody in your precinct that you know is dead wood and doesn't do anything and doesn't care about the Constitution, but they don't want to give up their seat, we can actually tell you which doors to knock on in your neighborhood who vote in the primary. And I've been challenged one time since 1984 for my primary, or for my precinct position, and there are 500 households in my precinct, and I looked at that and I thought, how am I going to knock on 500 doors in the time I have allowed? Well, I went to the county clerk, and the county clerk said, well, historically only 100 of those households vote regularly in the primary, and we can tell you which addresses those are. So that makes the prospect much more. On my website here, I have a page called Precinct Patriots. It will actually, if you follow the steps that are on there, we can help you know how to do that to make your street walking more efficiently, and also there's a brochure that you can access that I've already written on what a precinct committee person is, a description, and a place for you to just plug your picture in, put the election date on the front of it, and then go drop those by your neighbor's home. So that makes the whole process pretty streamlined. So those are the 7 things that between now and November, we really need to focus on. I know there will be another crisis, some issue, but unless a vote really does come, pretty much expect that the House will kill anything the Democrats are trying to do right now. If in St. Louis, if that's not true, I'm sure Phyllis will tell you. So now let's, with that overview, let me talk a little bit about the caucus. The key to caucusing efficiently is to understand several things, but let's start with the point of why do we have a caucus in the first place. On the radio, on Wednesday morning after the presidential primary was held, the local conservative radio station news jockey said, these caucuses seem sort of elitist. Why are the Republican Party doing these elitist techniques? And I got a phone call immediately about that one, and I'm going to be on his program next Wednesday to try to explain that when any organization meets, there are a number of people engaged in the process all the time, year-round. For some of us, we eat, sleep, and breathe politics, and we're engaged and involved. And just as there is a group of people that run your local Rotary Club, that facilitate the meetings and make things happen so that the members can come and feel like they're making progress, there are a group of leaders in the party structure that make things go along week to week and month to month and year to year. And so it isn't elitist at all, but how would you like it if you remember the Rotary Club and the member of your neighbor who's on the Kiwanis Club came over and said, I want to vote in your leadership? It wouldn't quite seem appropriate. So in the process of electing a nominee for president, the people that work on this every day in and day out feel like it's only natural for them to help produce the events that lead to those candidates. Now there's a little bit of mixture in here mostly because of the apathy of people the past few years. Those people who are most involved in leadership could pretty much have things their way. They could make a few phone calls and say, will you be the legislative district chairman this year, or the vice chair, and will you come to this meeting and elect me to be the chair, and will you will you elect me to be the chair of the caucus or whatever? And because nobody else is really engaged, it just has gone on that way, and it's been pretty convenient for them. In most cases, I don't think there's been a whole lot of corruption about it, except the fact that anybody that has unchecked power or is not transparent is going to do things to kind of help themselves out. It's just, again, human nature. It's an understanding of how we all are. We want to do things as easily as possible, and we want things to go our way. So when you show up at your caucus, there will be a county chairman to initiate the process. And it's his job to come in as a temporary chairman and elect and set up the caucus with the rules for how the caucus is going to work. Now, he can be, so his first job essentially will be to elect a permanent chair. That's, well, on my sample agenda, and these can vary from county to county. I'm going to do mine just a little bit different this year, and I put that on here. He will call the county to order, do the pledge invocation, and in my case, I'm going to appoint credentials committee so that when we have the election of the caucus chair, permanent caucus chair, nobody will say, well, that wasn't done officially. Typically, the agenda says that the temporary chair conducts an election and the permanent chair is elected immediately. And so that will most likely be the structure that you'll follow at your caucus, because that's sort of the template that they use. Dennis, you want to comment on that?
John, this is where the difference in the St. Louis County area.
Yes, sir.
The county committee man and committee woman are the ones that do the chairing.
Oh,
We're talking
right.
about as opposed to the county chairman.
Right.
It's gonna be the committee man and the committee woman.
Yeah, in some of the larger counties, the county chairman obviously can't be everywhere at once, and so they take a subdivision at the precinct level, or I think there's, what would you say, 28 at the township level, 28 townships
28 townships in St. Louis County.
in St. Louis County, and so the precinct committee, the township committee man and woman, or committee man, chairman, it could be a man or a woman, will start the ball rolling in that case. Now let me back up just a minute before I go on into the process. The caucus is assigned by rules of the National Committee to, in cooperation with the State Committee, to generate 2 slates of delegates in Missouri. So we're going to meet as a county or a precinct, some subdivision, and elect delegates to 2 different meetings. Okay, we're going to elect on April 17th. There is a congressional district convention that elects approximately half of the delegates, and then on June 2nd there is a state convention that elects approximately half of the delegates.
That's April 21st.
April the 21st.
Right.
What did I say?
17th. Right.
17th, okay, you're right, it's the 21st. It's written down here right, but the caucus is March 17th, and you want to check me on all these numbers. Yes, sir?
I'm confused, Mr. Putnam. You spoke about having a precinct committee, and there was also a township committee.
Yes.
So my understanding is that March 17th in St. Louis County, the townships will be have precincts.
Yes, sir. In the area, in the eastern side of the state, the precincts are called, that I'm familiar with on the western side of the state, precincts are called townships over here. It's the same subdivision within the county, but it's got a different name. It's called a township over here.
Okay, but there are precincts within the township.
Yeah. That is correct.
Oh, there are?
Yeah.
See, I don't, okay.
But the precincts do not have elected committee men or women, that is only at the township level.
Okay, well, I came over here last
Each
week.
township is subdivided into precincts, just for voting patterns, so people know what voting place
It's
to
just
go.
voting precincts.
But they don't have any committee men or women at the precinct level. They only have them at the township level.
Oh, very good, okay. So, one of the things is to find a glossary of terms, explore Robert's Rules of Order, and the first person to talk to about any of this stuff is your county chairman or the person who typically is gonna lead the meeting, because he is obviously gonna be in an advantageous position to make things happen that will favor the outcome that he prefers. Now, hopefully, he won't do that in a domineering or tyrannical way. He'll do it open and transparent and fair, but that possibility exists that they could come in and try to elect a slate of people to go to the next level before you ever figure out what's happening. That's why we're having this meeting. At these caucuses, wherever the caucus is in your county, you will elect delegates to the congressional district convention that you're in, and a group of delegates to go to the state convention. There are 8 congressional districts. Let me this picture might help. There are 8, the county or the township in some cases will conduct a meeting and choose 2 tracks. There are 8 congressional districts in the state of Missouri, so each of those congressional districts will elect 3 delegates to the to the national meeting. Then there'll be another meeting. The caucus will send delegates to the congressional district meeting. The district meeting will elect 3 delegates and alternates to the national meeting. That's 24 of the total of Missouri delegates, or 52 delegates to the national convention. This is not a democratic process. This is a republic process. You know, we elect people to represent us, and that's what this is modeled on. Not that everybody's vote is exactly the same. We're for equal opportunity, but not necessarily equal outcome. So this process starts at the caucus level. The caucus elects a slate of delegates to the district convention. The district convention elects 3 people, 3 delegates and 3 alternates to the national convention. On the other track, at the same caucus, a different slate, maybe a different slate, could be the same slate, but it is another election. It's of people who will go to the state convention on June the 2nd in Springfield. When they get to Springfield, they will elect 25 delegates to go to the national convention, and it's a statewide slate. All right, yes, sir?
In St. Louis County, it's mostly the same slate that goes to both the congressional district meeting and the state convention in Springfield. Seldom will you have separate slates.
Well, and my experience has been that there are always a handful of people who can't go to both meetings. Most of them would like to, but they may have something.
But that's why you have alternates.
Planned. The rules of your caucus will determine how those slates are designed, and it could be either way. You could certainly be the same slate and the alternates fill in if that's how that caucus wants to do it. Let me finish a few more things before we take too many more questions. So I've said 24 delegates are going to be elected through the district conventions, and 25 delegates are going to be elected through the state convention. That's 49, but I said there are 52 delegates. Missouri has 3 super delegates. The national committee man, the national committee woman, and the state chairman go to the national convention as delegates from Missouri and every other state, whether they get elected on a slate or not. So that makes the 52. Okay, Missouri is going to send 52 delegates to Tampa. And okay, so the process, let's back up to when you walk into your caucus, the temporary chairman is going to put the meeting in order, either by credentialing some voters who will elect a permanent chairman for that meeting, very front end of the meeting. The permanent chairman then is going to appoint several other committees. The rules committee by which this meeting is going to be run, which will have been worked on ahead of time but not officially approved yet. So your county, in most cases, the county or township head has a head start on this, and so he's going to be working on, he's talked to people who are willing to be delegates, and he's going to put them on a list, and he knows what rules facilitate an efficient meeting, and he will put some rules together. It's possible that that person will not be elected to the permanent chairmanship. If a group feels like he's not going to treat them the way they want to be treated, they can walk in and nominate a different permanent chairman. And I use chairman in the generic sense of male and female. I went to seminary and had my master's thesis critiqued, and they said I was sexist in my use of pronouns. So. Product of the 50s public schools. But chairman, chairwoman, chairperson, they're gonna get the meeting started. They're gonna have some rules to run on that are gonna be approved after the meeting starts. And unless somebody else gets their chairman elected who brings their rules, and it could get fairly chaotic at that point.
Really?
We usually do this with a slate of delegates, because if in my county, which has 46 delegates to each of these two conventions here, if we had everybody stand up and the rules said there will be a nomination of 2 people, and each one that wants to be a delegate will say why they should be the delegate, and they have 1 minute to speak for and 1 minute to refute, and you have debate rules, and they make their pitch, and you do that 46 times for delegate to the district convention, and then you do that 46 more times to the alternates, and you do that 46 more times to the state's slate, and so forth. The meeting will, just that part of the meeting will last several hours, and you haven't even talked about platform issues yet. So the rules are to make things streamlined, but shouldn't be imposed in an arbitrary fashion, so that when you walk in there, you don't have any idea what's going on or how to participate. You should be informed about Robert's Rules of Order, so that if somebody nominates a slate and the leader of the caucus says, or has prearranged, this has happened before, I'm not insinuating that anybody would do that in St. Louis, but they could have somebody planted in the audience to say, Mr. Chairman, I move nomination cease. And somebody else says, I second the motion, and the chairman says, all in favor say aye, and the nominations are closed, only one slate's been nominated, and everybody else is out of luck. Yes, sir?
Can you do mini slates?
So
instead of individuals or a whole slate, can you do?
Every caucus writes the rules, and that there are a number of different ways this can be done. That's why I encourage you to get involved with the chairman if he's a good guy. Say, I'd like to be on your slate. I'd like to participate in the making of the rules, and you'll be that much more informed when you get there.
Okay, John, just to clarify, and I'm a little bit, this is my first time to ever deal with a caucus.
I understand.
A caucus is for each county,
Or
not
in,
for each little city or township, not township to town.
it is a county caucus in most counties in Missouri, but in some very large counties like St. Louis County, it is done, there are multiple caucuses at the township level rather than a county-wide caucus.
So in other words, in Franklin County, anyone who wants to participate in the caucus process has got to go to that March 17th meeting, regardless of whether they're at the lower end of the Sullivan or way up as far as
If that's where the county caucus is held.
and no other meeting would have any bearing other than that particular caucus.
On the selection of delegates.
Right.
Now, another thing that the rules are going to determine is how are those delegates allocated to the next level? Are they committed to a certain candidate or what? And that's why you want to be there when the rules are read. And there's a piece, somebody already imposed it today. They said a while ago, point of order. That's out of Robert's Rules of Order. And if the freight train gets going too fast and you are not sure what's going on and you want to slow it down, if you know for instance, if you have the agenda and they get off it like the other night when I had the county meeting and forgot to approve the minutes, somebody said, Mr. Chairman, you're out of order, we haven't approved the minutes yet. It helps if you know that. One of the pieces in your book, in your handouts, is a Robert's Rules of Order cheat sheet. But if the motion comes to close nominations before the Robert's Rules of Order procedure is followed, which is normally, are there any other nominations? And then a second slate can be nominated. And then the chairman is to say again, are there any other nominations? And at the point no other nominations are made, he is required by Robert's Rules of Order to say another time, are there any other nominations? At that point, according to Robert's Rules of Order, someone can move that nominations cease. All right.
Does it have to be in the rules that additional nominations can be made?
No, because, well, I would hope that the rules will include as one of the major rules, we will be following Robert's Rules of Order, a newly revised edition.
Yeah.
And we can, those of you who might be in the position of working on rules, I can furnish you with a suggested list of rules from this website. You can plug into that and get a copy of working rules so that you'll be kind of up to speed on that.
One question?
All right.
Point of information?
Yes, sir.
Is this what you're talking about, the rules, suggested rules?
There are several in your packet, and they vary by county or by group that has suggested what they should be. There are some larger parameters from the state call to convention that they need to fit within the framework of the state call to convention, but something like I'm going to do in Jasper County by having the Credentials Committee report before the election of the permanent chair is at the discretion of the local caucus.
What about the location of where the caucus is set? I know one particular instance where the location is not going to house that many participants.
That's going to be a real embarrassment to the person who's charged with that responsibility and has to advertise it in the newspaper 15 days in advance. Or if he doesn't do that and cannot furnish, when he turns in his caucus results, he has to mail all of these slates and all of the platform changes. He mails those in to the state chairman on the Monday following. If he doesn't have a copy of a newspaper ad where that ran, he's subject to having the outcome completely challenged at the district.
Admission to the caucus would not necessarily be needed, at this particular point. Admission to the caucus wouldn't have a rule to preclude anyone from not being able to attend because of no seating. It would be standing room. So is there, at that particular time, there would be no rules on attendance?
The only attendance rules I've ever seen are a registration period before the official caucus begins, and the chairman can arrange to close the doors at 10 o'clock. If that's, most caucuses are scheduled to start at 10 o'clock. If you show up at 10 o'clock, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. You need to come at least at 9, or in a big county 8, so that you can be approved by the Credentials Committee as a legitimate voter. Legitimate voters in these meetings are to be, at a minimum, on the registered voter list of that county or township. And many of us are going to ask for a photo ID at the time, because that's a bill we're working on and we're trying to get people used to that. So,
John, just, if I could just interject, in St. Louis County, each township will have a list of all registered voters, which they will use to verify that the person coming in to participate is a registered voter.
yes, if you don't have your voter ID card, then we're just going to have to wait on the questions till I get through the process here a little bit. The Credentials Committee will check people in if they have a voter ID card, and if your caucus decides, and having the rules, a photo ID to prove that they're who they say they are, they will have them sign in, or they will verify, either through their voter ID card or the list that Frida's talking about, that they are a registered voter in that jurisdiction. the next thing that they will have to do is sign a list that at minimum says, I am a strong and faithful Republican, and write their name down on a list making this allegiance. Because because I already know that some Democrats are coming to the caucuses, I'm toying with the idea of asking them also to pledge to vote for Republican candidates in the fall. But that will raise some issues, and I actually want the issue to be raised because there's a bill in the state legislature, 1052, that would require all registered voters in Missouri to register by party in the future rather than have an open primary system, and I'm in favor of that. But I really need to keep going unless it just can't keep going without this question.
If I can catch up with somebody who knows about precincts in St. Louis County later, that's fine with me.
Sure.
This doesn't mean any practical difference to me as a Republican in St. Louis County, or is it just the township?
We'll get you hooked up with some people who know the answers to those kinds of questions.
John,
Okay.
real quick.
All right.
Is the election of the caucus secretary as well?
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Okay. I'm looking on here.
It's on the list.
I didn't see that.
But I am skipping around, so you may not think I'm still on the list. If we get back to the sample caucus agenda, the permanent chairman will be elected. There will be a parliamentarian appointed to help if there are different people claiming interpretations of Robert's Rules of Order. It will be left to the parliamentarian to rule on which is the correct interpretation of Robert's Rules of Order. There could be you have the ability to appoint a sergeant at arms if you think there's going to be anybody there disrupting the caucus. There was a post on Facebook Tuesday that Democrats who had gone to vote for Ron Paul in the precinct in the presidential primary on that day were going to the caucuses to vote to try to disrupt the caucuses by skewing the vote outcomes and things like that. I'm not saying the Ron Paul people are interested in that. I'm saying that there are people out there who can make mischief because we don't have a closed primary in Missouri, a closed primary system. So a sergeant of arms may be required to help some people leave if they need to and are not legitimate voters. The caucus, the approved delegate, the approved voters, certified voters, we call them at the caucus level, will sit in a section like this, and all the guests that were not certified need to stay behind some kind of a line or in a balcony or away from the deal, so that when there is a vote called, there's not any confusion. We also recommend that you actually hand out a credential like this that would have a certain color on it if you're a certified voter and a different color if you're a guest in the meeting, to help the chairman make sure that the wrong people are not voting, just like you whenever you go to other official meetings like that. Then there are no substitutes or alternates at the caucus level. That'll be something that you would deal with at the next level. So the permanent caucus chairman gets elected, the permanent caucus secretary gets elected, and then reads a kind of an official script, what's called the call to convention, and it's a pretty short thing at the caucus level, much longer at the district level. But it can be moved to be dispensed with, and I'm sure it'll be widely distributed. You will have an opportunity to read that, and it tells part of what's going on. The permanent chair will then appoint the other committees, a rules committee, a tally committee, and perhaps a platform or a resolutions committee. He may, if it's the county chairman conducting the business of the meeting, he will have talked to some people ahead of time so that they aren't coming there trying to figure out the rules from the start when they get there. They will have a template that they're working from. The controversial issues like how are these delegates going to be allocated at the next level of meeting will be finalized in the meeting as part of the approval of the rules. And if they will be presented again as a package, and if one of them you don't like, you can suggest that the allocation, for instance, be handled differently by moving, while it's under debate whether to pass the rules or not, Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that we take out Rule 13 and substitute this rule and submit it for the body to review and vote on. When all is said and done, the rules will be approved, and those will be the rules by which the meeting will be conducted. If, in most cases, a voice vote will be called for. If the chairman cannot discern the outcome of a voice vote, he can call for what Robert's Rules of Order calls a division of the House, which means that people stand up on for one proposition and against in sequence so that the tally committee can count. And if somebody insists, they can move that you have a secret ballot, in which case the tally committee will be prepared to pass out ballots if the motion to have a secret ballot is seconded and approved by the group. So one person can't do it all by themselves, but they can, there is a process for asking for a secret ballot. If the group approves, then paper will be handed out, and it'll be the tallies committee's responsibility to make sure that the number of votes cast in that vote doesn't exceed the number of certified voters that are supposed to be voting there. All right, then while these committees are doing their work, it's not uncommon for the maybe some esteemed official. We have a guy in the 7th Congressional District named Emory Melton that was a state senator forever before they had term limits. And he's still alive in his 80s, and if he's anywhere around the Berry County Caucus, they will be asking Emory Melton, please come and tell us how important this election is. And so there can be a keynote speech during the time that the Rules Committee is doing its work and finalizing some things. There could also be a recess during this period of time if the allocation of the rules is going to be such that you want to send so many of your delegates for Rick Santorum or Mitt Romney or Newt Gingrich or Ron Paul. Those elements within your caucus could meet together and say, which of you are willing to be a delegate for this candidate, and go to the next level and represent his interest at that level. Again, this is going to be decided, the rules will decide how that allocation takes place. Some are doing it proportionately. Some have suggested that if anybody wins 50%, they will take, all the delegates will be committed to voting for that candidate at the next level. Some are saying we're not going to ask for a commitment to a candidate at all. We're simply going to ask that you are committed to vote for the Republican nominee, whoever it is. When you go to the next level, you're going to do your best and represent us well. So again, this will be have to be defined in the rules so that you'll know how it happens. And then the other thing that the rules should address is if a delegate leaves the floor at one of these other conventions, the district or state convention leaves the floor, there should be, for your jurisdiction to have the right number of votes at all times on the floor, an alternate should move up and be seated while he's going to the bathroom, or if he's had to leave, that there's always, in Jasper County's case, 46 voting delegates on the floor at all times. You can do that according to the way the list is submitted. You can do that, the rules can say we're going to move up one Romney supporter first, and if a second guy goes off the floor, we're going to move up a Santorum voter, and then a third guy off the floor, we're going to move up a Gingrich voter or a Ron Paul voter. These are the kinds of things that people need to, and some of this gets tedious, but again, if it's open and everybody's treated fairly instead of somebody steamrolled, then everybody will still love each other when they leave, and that's really important this year. Okay, so that's some more of the process. We need to understand the flow of the meetings. That's what I've been describing, how they lead to the national convention. And we need to understand the agenda You also need to know the dates when you leave here of when those meetings are. They're pretty well published, but if you can be a delegate, make sure you carve that day out. Some people don't think it's fair, you have to go spend all day to do this, but I think our country's worth it. So if you have to take a day off of work to be on at your district convention on April 21st, do it and be there. And then as best you can, know the rules before you get there, because they're gonna come at you very fast when you get there, and some decisions will have to be finalized while you're there. I think I've covered why we do slates in the bigger counties rather than elect people individually.
What's a slate?
What is a slate?
Let's back up and get the big picture, instead of line by line through the meeting. What is the purpose of the meeting, other than just 3 delegates, that's it? I mean,
The purpose of the caucus, the purpose of the caucus is to send a number of delegates to the Congressional District Convention and a number of delegates to the State Convention and submit resolutions to change the Missouri platform. Okay, those are the 3 purposes of the meeting. The Congressional District meeting elects 3 delegates. The State Convention elects 25 delegates and alternates. And there will be further platform changes all the way through the system up to the National Convention until a new party platform is finalized.
Back to the question, a slate is for a candidate, a slate is...
The slates are delegates that will go to the next level. They, at the caucus level, they may or may not be committed to voting for a delegate who is committed to a certain candidate. Typically, they are presented as a group, and if someone's not happy with that, they can move to amend by taking a certain name off and putting a certain name on, and the rules would say each party gets 2 minutes to argue why that should happen. That's rather than start from scratch and build it one at a time. Typically, they're done as a group or a slate, and then substitutions are made by a motioning process. Same thing will happen at the state level.
Since St. Louis County is so large and it's divided into 28 townships that each will have their own caucus, how many delegates are allotted to St. Louis County is my one question. And number 2, are the rules set at the county level, or are they set at each one of these 28 township meetings?
Every caucus sets their own rules as long as they're within the rules of the call to convention. So each caucus will do that. Dennis is running a local caucus, hopefully so.
There's a total of 250 delegates allocated to St. Louis County. How many do you have?
22.
22. We have 19 in the wild cards. And that's kind of a breakdown of what you're going to see all the way across the entire county.
Now those are delegates to the district convention and delegates to the state convention. When the delegates get there, that came from the caucus, they will choose another set of delegates to go to the national convention.
Point of information?
Yes, sir.
Rather than try to explain each township, how many they have, can you just give us a resource to go find it? I know there are ones for the state and county level.
Yeah,
you can find out. Is there a resource for finding it out?
Is there anything online, Dennis?
No, eventually you'll be able to get it off the Missouri GOP website.
Well, there is a link I handed out. Doesn't look like it's on my page, but there is a link. If you go to the MOGOP.org website, the menu across the top says caucuses, right on the front page. If you click on that, you will get a description of some of what I've said, plus time and place of every caucus in Missouri. They're not all there yet, because they haven't all been chosen.
There is another reason for St. Louis County. Some people live in the 2nd Congressional District. You will go to the 2nd Congressional District caucus in April. Some people live in the 1st Congressional District. You will go to the 1st Congressional District caucus.
Actually,
you need
those
to
are
know-
called conventions, not caucuses.
I'm
That's
sorry,
right.
conventions.
You see why people
So,
are
the
confused.
second congressional district has the number of delegates that Dennis said,
The 250.
and the first congressional district has another set of numbers, I don't know.
Right. Dennis is in the second, so he was talking about the second.
Are these the new congressional
Yeah.
districts?
Yeah.
Yes, we're using the new congressional districts in this cycle.
Another question, I forgot it now. Oh, okay, you're talking about these caucuses, and this is gonna be a process on to another convention, a county convention, and then a state convention, and so on. But how come on caucus day, though, there's declared a winner of the caucus?
Not in Missouri.
Not in Missouri?
No, sir. You can take a straw poll if you want to of the people who come to your caucus, but it's not required under the laws and the rules to do that. If you're gonna allocate your delegates, you may need to do that. If you're gonna base it on the people who came to the caucus, some people may wanna use the results of the primary the other day, but that was a very skewed affair too, so, not necessarily. Right here?
Yeah, and so I guess my understanding is that the final decision on the makeup of what everything will look like at the national convention in terms of selecting a nominee for the, I know it's not just the top office in the land, but that's pretty important too. But it's not gonna be decided until the state convention, and it could be that it will be a divided group of delegates. It could be that somebody makes the motion, hey, if somebody gets more than 40% or 50%, it's winner take all. It could be any of those things. It's gonna be decided at those meetings.
I believe the call to convention requires the delegates at the district level and the state level to commit who they're gonna be, to state who they're gonna be committed to when they go to, if they're elected to go to Tampa. So each, and they don't have to all be for one, they could be a mixed group, but I don't think the rules allow for an uncommitted delegate to go to the convention. I have to check some of that out, but
But those decisions will not be made at the individual caucuses
That's
on March
correct.
17th.
that's correct.
All you do is elect delegates to go to the next level, and those people will pick who they're gonna
The
vote for.
ultimate decision, I guess, is the state convention.
That is correct.
Yes,
right?
and
It'll be at the state convention.
well, no, for 25 of the delegates will be chosen at the state convention,
With the others.
and 24 through the district conventions. At that point, those people who are elected will be obligated to vote for that candidate that they committed to on the first ballot in Tampa. If a candidate gets 1,144 of these pledged delegates before the convention starts, everybody will relax and say somebody has won it. But if all four people stay in the race all the way up to that point, the way things are going now, we could have what's called a brokered convention where nobody arrives, no candidate arrives at Tampa with a majority of the votes, 1,144 votes at that point, and they will have to settle it after they get to the convention. And that's when it really gets interesting.
Check your mic, I don't think your mic's been.
Okay,
Yeah,
let me come back to, let me finish talking about platform resolutions.
John,
I've lost my
before you go
plot.
on, this is back with the slate. Just a quick question about the slate. Some people have asked me, and I want to be sure about this, but in county level caucus, when we present our slate, the people that are on the slate, say if we get 40 delegates and 40 alternates in the county caucus meeting and we're showing the slate, do those delegates have to be present at the county caucus meeting to be sent forward, voted on and sent forward to the congressional and then to the
It
state?
depends on what your rules say. The rules can be written to require people to be at the caucus. If they're not written that way, someone who shows up at the caucus may pick the name of someone who didn't show up at the caucus, who is on the proposed slate that was nominated, and say, so-and-so is not here, I cared enough to come, I think I should be on the slate, and so-and-so should be set aside.
So anybody that wants to be on a slate should be committed to actually attending the county caucus because of the rules could go either
To
way.
be sure that you don't get bumped off the slate later, that's probably a good safety
Okay.
feature to be involved in. Yes?
John, if I'm a delegate from my county or township caucus, do I need to go to the congressional convention and the state convention? or
Depends
do I
on
just-
which slate you're elected to. There are two slates elected at the caucus. One goes to the district level, another slate goes to the other. They can be the same, but they don't have to be.
Okay.
So the rules may designate that they have to be both, and then somebody who can go to one and go to the other is excluded by the way the rules are written. But that's uncommon in my experience.
How could one wearing two hats, a district and a state delegate, go to the national and have two votes?
Well, because the caucus sends delegates to this middle layer, and when they get there, they choose a totally different delegate to go to the national level. It's a two-step tiered
So
effect.
when we said the district and the state delegate could be one and the same, one person going to two different meetings.
On 2 different days, and they'll have a vote at each meeting, if that is the case. And if people feel shortchanged, they may agree at the meeting, well, why don't you go to the district convention and you go to the state convention, and then everybody gets to do something, and we get, I mean, that's a perfectly good compromise, rather than to have somebody come in and say, I want to do everything. And, all right, you've got the mic here.
2 more questions. This past Tuesday, we had a time, what bearing does that have on any of this?
Nothing.
Is there any obligation on the delegates?
There's no legal obligation. The caucus rules could determine locally, we want to follow that percentage. It's discretionary though, it's not required.
And it seems like we were penalized. Were we penalized because of by the Republican National Committee or something? For not allowing our primary process?
No, without getting into why we're here, that's, sort of water under the bridge at this point. We can't really change it. I'll be happy to explain it afterward. There was a threat of being penalized because the timing of our primary by the National Committee was going to give us only half our delegates if we didn't move our primary back to April 1st. And we didn't get it done. The way that we avoided that penalty was to allow delegates to be assigned at the caucus level, which is, I guess it was March 1st was the deadline. And now we are choosing delegates after March 1st, so we are not penalized by the National Party. Yes, ma'am?
What if you go to the caucus and there's 4 different slates or 5 different slates or whatever? How does that, give us a typical scenario of how.
If there are a number of nominations for anything, the rules, again, would specify whether a plurality winner would be the final one selected. I think in most cases, that's how we choose primaries. It's whoever got, you can have, last time we had an 8-way race for Senate, or 9, and as long as somebody got, whoever got the most, even if it was 30%, or whatever, was elected. Most of us, I think, like to feel like at least a majority of the people are behind us. So the way we handle that at meetings such as this is we would, say 5 slates are nominated, we would vote on all 5, and if no one got a majority, we would drop the bottom one and vote again. And we would, if no one got a majority of the 4, we would drop the lowest of the 4 and vote on the 3. And if no one got a majority of the 3 on the next round, we would drop the lowest of the 3 and have a vote between 2 so that a majority would surely vote for the group we finally settled on.
So you're voting on that group as a whole?
That is correct. When the motion is made for that group to be approved, most caucuses allow the substitution of an individual name for one name on the slate. That's usually how the rules are written to keep it expeditious. So if, it's awkward at that point. If you want to be a delegate and the slate, and your name's not on the slate, that's a good reason to be on the right side of the chairman who's going to be running the meeting, is that you have a better chance of being on the slate if you want to be a delegate, if you're in good with him, because he's going to bring a slate, and by virtue of his prior involvement and commitment in the past, it's a privilege that he can play with a little bit. Oh boy. All right, over here.
John, I think you should tell everybody, because I haven't heard it yet today, and I've been asked, if somebody drops, because we have 4 running now, and everybody's worry is, well, what if we tie our delegates to a certain individual? Past, from what I've been taught, is if somebody drops out, usually they release their delegate.
That's correct.
So I just want people to know, because I was new to this, and everybody needs to know that if somebody drops out, and if we get down to 3, and you've tied your delegates,
In 1996, when I went to the National Convention in San Diego as a delegate for Alan Keyes, Pat Buchanan and Bob Dole were still in the race at that point in time.